Hello, I'm Mike Ward, and welcome to this edition of Conversations in Healthcare, which has been recorded in collaboration with One Nucleus's On Helix conference, which is focusing on new medicines in a brave new world. In the Conversations in Healthcare series, which is brought to you by Clarivate, a global leader in providing solutions to accelerate the life cycle of innovation, we talk to the people who live and breathe the process of turning ideas into innovation across the whole of the healthcare ecosystem. As I mentioned, the focus of this year's On Helix is the creation of new medicines in a post-pandemic world. In the past 18 months, the life sciences sector has demonstrated how it can mobilize its resources to tackle the greatest healthcare challenges in recent history. A key component of that effort has been the translation of brilliant ideas into clinically meaningful solutions. A key catalyst in that translational process is the venture capital community that not only provides financial resources, but also networks and management support to advance the development of new medicines and treatments. So joining me today is Naveed Siddiqi, a senior partner with Novo Ventures, one of the most active venture capital groups in the life sciences sector. Naveed has more than 2 decades of experience in venture capital financing in life science companies, especially those based in Europe. Indeed, before joining Novo, which he did in September 2019, Naveed worked at Andera Partners, Phase 4 Ventures, and its predecessor, Nomura Phase 4 Ventures. So consequently, he is well placed to discuss the current climate for life science development. So Naveed, thanks for joining me today.
Mike, pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Great. So as a starting point, I think for our discussion, I think it might actually be useful for you to actually explain to the audience how Novo Ventures sort of fits into, I guess, the Novo Nordisk Foundation ecosystem, and therefore how that differentiates you from other venture capital organizations, when supporting life science companies.
No, I'd be happy to do that. So Novo Ventures is an early to late stage venture investor, and we are part of Novo Holdings. Novo Holdings is the holding company of Novo Nordisk, the pharmaceutical company, which is, semaglutide and insulin, big pharma company. But we at the holding company level have about 75 billion of AUM under asset management, of which 13 billion is dedicated to sort of specific direct life science investments. And we are ourselves owned by the Novo Nordisk Foundation, which is one of the top life science foundations globally. It's bigger than Gates and bigger than the Wellcome Trust. So so our mandate at Novo Holdings is to basically generate for-profit activity, generate returns, which then can be invested in the not-for-profit by Novo Nordisk Foundation towards very significant life science grant giving activities that they run, between $500 million and $1 billion of grant giving every year they do, as well as impact and social impact investing that they do. So within Novo Ventures, we have one of the oldest teams within Novo Holdings who's been investing in life sciences. We started about 20 years ago, and these days we're investing between 400 to 500 million annually in life sciences. So it makes us one of the top, most impactful investors in life sciences, and we're investing principally in the Europe and the US, and we've now just started an activity in Asia as well. So in terms of the scope of the investments, we do both private investing and public investing. So it makes it a little bit unusual compared to normal venture capital groups, because we have both activities within our team. And there are different partners who focus on different aspects there. But we have 4 offices, one in Copenhagen, one in London, one in Boston, and one in San Francisco. So we're pretty much covering, I would say, some very significant life science hotspots by having local offices there. And we are a team of 26 with 20 investment professionals, all MDs, PhDs. in that scope. So in terms of, to give you a sort of idea of the scope of the activity that we're doing with this, last year we invested 570 million, of which we did 39 public company investments and 33 venture financings. We have an evergreen structure, and it's also safe to say that we're a very significant player in the companies that are going public on NASDAQ. So last year we had 9 companies that went public on NASDAQ from our private portfolio. We invested in 6 IPOs. And this year we already have had 5 companies already go public on NASDAQ, and we've got a couple more coming down the pipe just this quarter. So so this is kind of gives you a little bit of the overview of ventures and how it sort of sits in the ecosystem.
I mean, and what's interesting is, I mean, quite a lot of pharmaceutical companies have their own sort of corporate venture capital activities. Yeah. But it sounds like your Novo Ventures, again, is not a sort of, it's not a traditional corporate venture outfit. So again, so how would you sort of differentiate yourselves, say, for example, from M Ventures, which is the sort of the Merck arm?
Absolutely. No, happy to do that. So yes, we are not a traditional corporate venture group. So we're not strategic to Novo Nordisk's activities. We are actually like just a normal investment firm. Our mandate is to generate returns in life sciences for Novo Nordisk Foundation. So we are kind of area agnostic. We're not tied to the strategic objectives of what Novo Nordisk is doing, and we are a profit motive investor. Yeah.
Right. I mentioned in my introduction that the life science sector, certainly in the past 18 months, has effectively come into its own. Sort of the way it mobilized its resources to tackle the pandemic. I'd be interested to understand, how has the pandemic impacted both, I guess, the cadence of your investment activities, and also maybe the focus on which assets you now look to support?
No, thanks. I'm happy to do that, Mike. So when this first arose, sort of back, we cast our minds back to last, late February, early March, as the things were evolving and were really hitting us. I think everybody was a bit startled at the speed of the impact, and I guess we saw that for a little while there was a bit of a temporary pause in activity or slight reduction. Because of the type of investor we are, evergreen, we act and do both private and public investing. We took a very early decision that this was actually an opportunity for us to not slow down and continue to invest through this cycle and be more active than ever. And so actually we ended up in exceeding what we normally do, is kind of 400 to 500 million, with 570 million that we put away last year. So I think in terms of the rest of the market, it kind of caught up, and the whole life science sector itself had a record year in terms of investors investing in the space. So I would say that while the pandemic obviously had a very significant impact on all our lives and on society and economies in general, it really did shine a light on the importance of the sector to bringing solutions to the table. That early stage research, which resulted in companies like Moderna kind of coming to the fore with vaccine solutions. So I think for us it was really reaffirming the reason why we're here, which is to bring innovation to the forefront so that it impacts society in general. And there was never a better example of that than last year, when the need for innovation and why we're doing it was exemplified in our daily lives. So we didn't really slow down. I think the areas of change in focus of where we were investing, well, we did think about it, and we had a sort of a view that there were certain areas that were going to result in more activity. So, for example, we invested in a company called Eargo in the US, which went public subsequently. This was a basically it was a remote hearing aid company where you could kind of get a hearing aid in your home. through without having any interface with going to a shop or a specialist to see them. So you could do it all virtually. So that was a classic example where their business really boomed because of that type of activity. The other area that we were investors in MD Live, which is a telehealth company, second largest. They really came into their own last year with that scope of activity, as you couldn't go and see your doctor in the clinic. So telehealth really came back, and they really grew, and in fact it resulted in an acquisition. We were able to sell the company this year to Cigna for a very profitable sale. It did put a spotlight on antivirals and antifungals as well, because again, this is an area that more recently, after people had thought, okay, well, HCV seems to be in a good place, HIV, we seem to have found solutions. And people had sort of spotlight had gone away a little bit from this area, but antivirals came back again for us, and we've been kind of looking there. Antifungals, we're investors in a company called F2G, which deals with rare molds, which first the severe fungal infections that can occur in the ITU setting, and patients are very vulnerable. They cause high levels of mortality. So it did put a focus back on certain areas. But we continue to invest quite much across the board in oncology, autoimmune diseases, GI across the board. Yeah.
Right. Just as a sort of a follow-on.
Yeah.
A lot of that activity, was that already in train before the pandemic? I mean, I could imagine that during the pandemic, it might be difficult to establish your new relationships. So how has that worked out? Have you actually been able to do some things absolutely new during the last 18 months?
Yes. So I, of course, it's a consideration. If you've never met a management team in person, and you just have a virtual roadshow and a virtual diligence exercise, it's not the same as an in-person meeting. But we adapted very, very quickly. And in fact, we didn't make that a barrier, and it didn't really stop us investing. But it is fair to say that those relationships where we had known companies before and had seen them before, I think they were placed at a little bit of an advantage, because we had met them, we had a bit of a history there. But by no means did it stop us still looking at those situations where we never met the team, and we did make investments like that, and we hired people in our team like that as well, who we now are getting to meet them in person. They're not just virtual pixels on a screen. So yes, I think we adapted, but there was a certain advantage if there had been a prior relationship.
Sure. And you already mentioned the fact that your investment approach is fairly sort of agnostic to the area, but are there any sort of sweet spots for Novo Ventures? And actually, probably even more importantly, are there any sort of areas that either have been recently deprioritized or actually you're just not that interested in?
Yes, so we are a kind of therapeutically agnostic. I would say most of the investments that we do are either sort of early stage, late stage, pre-commercial therapeutic stories, so the R&D stage, or commercial stage medtech companies, and particularly with the US commercialization focus is where we tend to sort of narrow our scope. So we don't tend to invest in medtech that is pre-commercial and which is outside the US. So that is definitely one area of limitation for us. But on the therapeutic side, it's very broad. Really, we don't sort of put limits on areas where we're not investing. So we are very heavily represented, like a lot of investors, in oncology. Almost approaching 30% of our portfolio is in oncology. Autoimmune, inflammation, CNS are all well represented in our companies. And a significant feature of when I look at the portfolio is that we have almost half of our portfolio in rare and orphan diseases. So That's also something that is significant. We have about 70 companies right now in our portfolio. So it's a large portfolio and with a kind of a very broad representation.
So I think it might be useful to sort of understand sort of what the whole sort of investment process looks like. So I mean, are there sort of some examples, say for example recent investments that you've made where you could sort of highlight what it was that caught your attention in the first place, and how what then needed to happen so that it became an investable opportunity? How did you get it to the term sheets?
Yes. Okay. Sure. So in Europe, last year we made an investment in a company called Novo Therapeutics, a Dutch company. It's a gamma delta T cell engager platform, a bispecific approach. So I think what was interesting about that opportunity for us was that it really, while we had the benefit of engaging with gamma delta T cells, we didn't have all the cell therapy manufacturing issues and supply issues that you normally deal with, and which are very expensive. It was like a normal T cell engager, approach, like a normal IV drug, so that you could kind of give at the patient. So that was an appealing way to think about how to bring the best of both worlds of sort of the cell therapy aspects of gamma delta T cells and how effective killers they are, with a more targeted approach using a bispecific platform. So this is a company we'd been following for a while and sort of seeing how they were developing. And for us, it was a question of sort of seeing data that in primates where we saw that the platform was working, and being close to the clinic, which then became another reason for us to get involved. So that is we made the investment. The company has since progressed. It's about to start dosing its patients. It has had a successful IPO in the first quarter. It's listed on NASDAQ, raised further amounts of capital there, and it's a round that we led last year. So that's an example of something in oncology we've done. Another company I might mention is quite different. It's a company called Vective Bio. It's a Swiss company. This is a GLP-2 agonist that we were excited because it was a potential best-in-class GLP-2 agonist. There is already a product called Gattex on the market from Takeda Shire, which sells over $500 million. But at the moment, it's used by very, very few patients. It's an expensive product, but it's not really widely used because of certain limitations of that product. So here we had an opportunity for a sort of a best-in-class, second-generation, once-a-week product with a better label to come through. And this is one where we supported the phase 2 to phase 3 transition of that company, and now they're in the phase 3 now, and we helped fund that company from a crossover round, and then ultimately into the IPO as well. We supported them heavily. So yeah.
So you sort of mentioned how for example with this sort of the Dutch investment, you've been sort of looking to see how they progress. I just wonder how often is your response to a pitch not just yet rather than no, and other sort of examples where that pitch has actually evolved from not just yet to actually a yes?
Yes, no, absolutely. So it's a difficult question to answer. I don't think I've got facts and figures readily at my tips, but I would say that we already get a pretty targeted deal flow. People kind of understand what we are looking for. So we tend to get many of these companies coming to us already, so not straight no's because they're out of scope. That's very unusual. So we take a close look. I would say that of the ones that we kind of get interested in, do some work on, they may be shortfalls in data, or the validation of the biology, or the chemistry still needs to be further optimized, or they have to have developed their development strategy further. So let's say biomarker strategy has to be further sort of honed down. The natural history in a rare disease data needs to come through as to what that might be, or a conversation with the regulator for a novel endpoint. So those are things that we will obviously decide and sort of think about whether we want to take that risk or not in that particular case. But we may like many elements of the story where we think, yes, if it's got a little bit further de-risked, we can come in. Or sometimes we're sufficiently excited and we're willing to take that risk and we jump in earlier. So yes, it is quite common for us to say no, not yet, but these are the things we're looking for. So if you can come back to us with that, then we'll be interested. And sometimes it's possible because there's an opportunity, because companies are always raising money, and you can come back and look at it later. And because of our structure, the way it is, a company can approach us at any point in its development, really, from a small, from lead optimization all the way to phase 3 with a product. And there are indeed companies that we have invested as a private company, gone public. The companies went public. We exited our position, and then we went back in when they had more data for their sort of heading it towards approval. So I think that's definitely we try to be transparent with the companies about where we stand.
Right. So when you're sort of looking at sort of the opportunities, and you've seen things coming across your desk,
yeah.
What are the sort of the most interesting sort of your developments in life sciences research that excite you? I mean, they might not be ready for investment yet, but they are the things that you're keeping a very, very close eye on.
Yes. No, of course, we're following a lot of the trends as they emerge and develop, and as areas become de-risked. I mean, a recent example is I've been kind of looking at the synthetic lethality space. Of course, the approval of the PARP inhibitors has opened up the possibility of novel targets, novel mechanisms, the next generation. I kind of see it like the IO space was, where suddenly, after the PD-1s were approved, there was like a huge spate of activity to see what else could we identify other synthetic lethal targets and lethality targets and kind of bring in those forward, next generations. So that's an example where an area opens up, and then we sort of are now looking at what's coming next down the pike to see. So that example, but it could be a totally new space where there isn't much approved. The protein degradation space, for example, tough area, but we're looking at approaches there and seeing what could be available. The bispecifics are having a bit of a renaissance, or interest. The ADCs are back in after their first wave. So it's not necessarily that it's just things that are going to be further coming down the horizon, but it be looking back into an area which went out of fashion, but now got more de-risked as further development occurred. So those are all important areas. We're kind of looking at the up and coming RNA therapeutic space as a new modality as well, and next generation viral vectors is a big need. To improve the viral vectors that we have out there to really expand that platform. We're looking at ways to make cell therapy easier, but right now there's a big question about this whole field we have to really improve. So allogeneic or improvements in manufacturing, point of care distribution of manufacturing. Those are sort of all the things that, as we look at the next 10 years and see what are the important new advances we need, where we should be looking to invest in some of those and deciding at what level of de-risking we want before we kind of go in. But yes, this is a very active area for us.
So as always, Naveed, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I'd like to thank you for taking the time to provide us the sort of those insights in how it operates at Novo Ventures, and also actually how you're helping innovators sort of translate, I guess, their bright ideas into medicines and treatments that are ultimately going to, help patients. I'd also like to thank the audience for tuning into this episode of Conversations in Healthcare, and remind you to actually follow and listen to other episodes for engaging, informative, and definitely inspirational content that actually can also provide you with insights to use. So it's available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcast directories. So make sure that you keep up to date with that. So until next time, I'm Mike Ward, and I'll see you around.